You got water?
I have water. Do you want some? It's tap water.
As long as it's clean water, 'cause we all need a little bit of clean water.
I don't think there's any other type of water right now.
Well, not according to the Supreme Court.
Oh,
all right, welcome everybody to the episode. My name is Caleb. I'm here today with Toddy and Colin, and we're going to be talking about WOTUS. Toddy, if you want to give a little introduction to who you are, what you do.
Oh, my name is Toddy Eldridge. I am a current student at CU Boulder in the Masters of the Environment program, which sounds really fun, but it just means that I really like reading about policy decisions regarding the environment and specifically about water. In the future, I hope to be working in a space that helps provide equity for water rights and clean water in general, for Americans, especially in the West, as we don't have a lot of water and we're not making sure that everyone gets it.
Yeah. Colin, who are you?
Yeah, so my name is Colin Kinsman. I'm also in the Master of the Environment program at CU Boulder, studying environmental and natural resource policy. But my fascination and specialization within the specialization concerns water scarcity issues here in the southwestern United States, which means pretty much everything, all things Colorado River and Colorado River Basin.
Nice. I'm Caleb. I am also in the CU Boulder Master of the Environment program.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that, all three of us. I am the odd one out of the three of us, though. They both focus on environmental policy, while I am in the urban resilience and sustainability tract with a dual specialization, the minor being the policy tract. But I also very much care about water, especially in our urban places, and how people use water, the quality of their water, and making sure everybody has safe, clean water to enjoy, whether that be drinking, cooking, sanitizing, playing in, fishing in, whatever it may be. Just having clean water for everybody. Which brings us to the topic of this episode, which is WOTUS. WOTUS stands for Waters of the United States. It is essentially the policy mechanism that allows the EPA to protect waters under the Clean Water Act. It's what gives them or defines what they can protect. So with that, I'll turn it over to
Me?
Toddy.
Rad.
To talk about a little bit of the history of what WOTUS is and how we got to what we are today.
Yeah, so it was originally defined, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was originally kind of defined in the Clean Water Act in the 70s, I think 1972, so that we could all be in an understanding of when the Clean Water Act is applied, it is applied to all water of the U.S., and in order to protect those waters, they were described as, in the original federal jurisdiction, as navigable waters, please hear my quotes, navigable waters defined by the Act as the waters of the United States under Clean Water Act Section 5027. This was used to protect many of the waters that we use daily for drinking, sanitation, and agriculture, and whatever else you can think to use water for. That came to be after we all decided that we should be not abusing our water systems and allowing industry to just be polluting as they saw fit straight into our water systems, especially since most of the water is water that we drink and use every day. So it's pretty wild that we weren't protecting those specifically beforehand. But in the 70s, especially after the Cuyahoga River fire and a bunch of other huge environmental acts, we decided as a country in the U.S. that we should be more proactive about protecting the environment to protect ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the Clean Water Act and the definition of the waters of the U.S. is a direct result from that. Recently, it's changed. If you want to tell us about it, Colin. Oh, do you want to tell us about the Cuyahoga River? Because that's also okay with me.
Yeah, as you were sitting here talking about the Cuyahoga River, I just got curious about the history of it. and just finding this this article from Smithsonian Magazine says that the river caught fire over a dozen times.
Yeah.
So apparently that's what it takes to actually.
That's what it takes for Congress to actually act on something.
Right, spur any change. Just a
literally
fiery river in the middle of America's industrial heartland.
Yeah, that's what gets them going.
Right.
Set a fire under them.
Exactly. So yeah, so Tati touched on the original definition being navigable waterways. However, I'm sitting here looking at this key milestone timeline in changing the definition of WOTUS throughout U.S. history, and it's changed any number of times. Mm-hmm. So one of the problems with the initial definition of being strictly navigable waterways is that it mostly pertained to major rivers in the eastern United States where they truly were navigable. Think barges and shipping, cargo, etc., traveling up and down the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. But that starts to become a problem when you get further out west, because out here, rivers are hardly navigable. Back in the late 1800s, surveying expeditions that went out west to survey the Colorado River as part of the Army Corps of Engineers, they were primarily concerned with, is the Colorado River, the most significant river in the southwestern United States, navigable? For any of the listeners who've ever been to the Colorado River, the Grand Canyon, or have had the privilege of perhaps rafting it, you know that that river is not quote traditionally navigable. You're not getting barges up and down the Colorado.
Yeah, there's like the great story of John Wesley Powell of going down the Colorado River and them having to like go down every single waterfall. That's not navigable.
Right, it's not navigable. And then you read other tales like the Emerald Mile, the speed record through the canyon, through the Grand Canyon in 1983, and how harrowing that was for small vessel designed for those rivers. But anyway, this leads to a lot of problems out in the West, and that's not necessarily what actually spawned the change in defining the WOTUS, Waters of the United States. Instead, I want to make sure that I get like the correct next.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're good.
So let's see. Was Rapanos the next?
Rapanos is in like 2008, so it's like the last one before Sackett.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that the what gives the power to the EPA under the Clean Water Act is the Commerce Clause.
Correct.
Which is very, very much has to do with it being navigable waterways, of being able to regulate interstate commerce.
I was going to say, it's interstate.
Yeah.
And that came up with the EPA definitions, is like interstate being something that some Supreme Court decisions kind of like hinge on.
Yes, exactly. So the WOTUS in its original state in 1972 CWA hinged on that Commerce Clause. That's where they've got their power to be able to regulate navigable waterways.
Right. So in 1973, after the Clean Water Act, the EPA defines WOTUS as including all, of course, navigable waterways, tributaries of navigable waters, interstate waters, intrastate waters used by interstate travelers for recreation or other purposes. Hence we get the rafting. So truly trying to be all-encompassing with the coverage of the Interstate Commerce Clause, or the Commerce Clause rather. But then also, or from which fish or shellfish are taken and sold in interstate commerce or used by industries in interstate commerce. So really covering
that covers. I mean, if you've got a pond that you're pulling crawfish from in Louisiana, but you're selling it in Mississippi, now that pond is a WOTUS.
I thought when you were talking about fish and shellfish, I was like, in the 70s we were trying to protect the wildlife, and then you said we were selling them. Like, oh, that makes sense.
No, in the end, it's still about protecting industry.
I was like, oh wow, we have like ecological protections in the 70s for animals. No.
Well, I mean, sort of.
But not in the way that I was expecting.
No, it's so someone can protect their bottom line.
Yeah.
But what's our next pit stop for a definition?
Yeah, so I'm sticking with this key milestones in defining WOTUS. And so one of the next pit stops is in 1975. The Army Corps issues an interim final definition of WOTUS, which again includes all the navigable waterways, but here we start to see the first mentions of wetlands, and so they define all coastal wetlands in similar areas contiguous or adjacent to, honing on this word adjacent because it's going to come up
quite a bit
consistently over the last 50 years in defining WOTUS.
Let me just make a little note.
Yeah, just jot it down, please. Areas contiguous or adjacent to other navigable waterways, rivers, lakes, streams, and artificial water bodies that are navigable waters under the U.S., artificial channels, so on and so forth.
Can I just ask real quick? So we included all of these definitions so that if there is like a company or industry or person polluting adjacent waterway or like something upstream, it doesn't affect the users downstream. Right? Is that how you guys see it?
That's exactly how I see it.
Yes, and that's been a primary concern, especially in the central and eastern parts of the United States. I would have to find the specifics, but yes, there are a number of cases where an upstream or upriver city or municipality was polluting the water, and a downstream municipality took legal action against the upstream.
Okay. Yeah. I was just like, I'm like, there's something, we keep adding more parts to this definition, and I was just like, I was wondering if you guys were tracking the same way. Like, I'm pretty sure this is just like adding one more set of bodies of waters so that we can track who is doing it and how to protect that water so that other people can have clean drinking water, clean irrigation water, clean
whatever they need.
Yeah.
The progress of the definition so far, what we're 3 years in, has been nothing but expansion of the definition to include more, and that's likely to change as you go further into the future.
Well, right, because the 1970s was the decade of environmental protections in the United States. I mean, it's kind of strange to think about now that Richard Nixon is still considered one of the greatest environmental protection presidents in U.S. history.
Just don't look at the rest of it.
Right, just don't look at the rest of it. Yeah, and then we continue on into the 70s and the post-Nixon era, and yes, we see this expansion. And so in 1979, for instance, the EPA, they revised the WOTUS definition to include waters used in the past, present, or susceptible to future use in interstate or foreign commerce, including waters subject to the ebb and flow of the tide. So here we start seeing coastal regions, those coastal wetlands again. Yeah. And then it expands even further. Interstate waters, including interstate wetlands. All other waters, the use, degradation, or destruction of which could affect interstate or foreign commerce. Impoundments of WOTUS, tributaries of WOTUS, territorial seas, wetlands. It goes on and on. This definition, with some modifications reflecting new exclusions, continues to be the regulatory definition of WOTUS until 2015. So, in the interim, there's still a number of other landmarks throughout the 80s, including a handful of Supreme Court decisions, including in 1985 Riverside Bayview Homes, which affirms the Army Corps and EPA's regulations defining adjacent wetlands.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then moving forward, let's go touch on this 2015, if that's the definition that is essentially the working definition for the next 30 years, give or take.
Yeah.
Right, so in 2015, EPA and the Army Corps promulgate the final Clean Water Rule. And what this does is it defines WOTUS as including, quote, all waters used in the past, present, or future to interstate commerce, essentially what we saw back in 1979. Yeah. And then all tributaries as defined, all adjacent waters as defined, and all waters determined on a case-by-case basis to have a significant nexus to, and there we go. There's
a significant nexus.
Significant nexus. So this is the introduction of the significant nexus test.
Yeah.
So I really want to know more about what this significant nexus test is. Like, what exactly constitutes being a significant nexus?
Right. So according to the Army Corps of Engineers, a significant nexus is any wetland that performs functions that society values, and where there is evidence for the real potential to affect the physical, chemical, or biological integrity of traditional navigable waterways, and when the evidence is more than speculative or insubstantial. So essentially, it's a test of any reasonable scientific understanding or understanding that a body of water or a wetland links to another navigable waterway.
Okay.
And that can be through groundwater,
Yeah.
surface water, anything that is scientifically and legally reasonable.
So that brings us back to that idea, like, if it is a navigable waterway, it's a water of the U.S. and therefore protected under the Clean Water Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just saying, like, any wetland that's, like,
Adjacent to,
connected to, nearby,
Yes.
affecting.
any wetland that could easily filter out into a navigable waterway is now a WOTUS under that, essentially.
Exactly, under this significant nexus test. And so then, according to the Army Corps of Engineers, to this this report that I'm looking at right now, what constitutes a significant nexus? There is a significant nexus when wetlands are performing some or all of these functions. And again, this is anything that is biological or essentially filtering and cleaning water.
Yeah.
Yeah, that flows into a navigable water. So there's a physical connection, chemical connection, or biological connection to that traditional navigable waterway. So the significant nexus test, in many ways, in 2001, expands the definition of waters in the United States, and therefore expands the total bodies that can be protected under the Clean Water Act.
And that makes a ton of sense, because if you have water filtering out from a wetland, and then someone fills it in, and now it's just straight runoff, taking like oil or whatever from the road, and you've got, let's say, crawfish in it, and you're selling that interstate.
Yeah.
Now, those crawfish are going to be affected, could be killed off. That's affecting your business.
Yeah.
But that makes a ton of sense that wetland would be protected because it's vital for commerce.
Yeah, I think we're all like circling around it, but I think I want to underline it. Wetlands themselves perform a lot of biological and physical functions to clean and like filter the water from organic and inorganic materials. So I just think that we should know that the USGS and the national parks and all of the 4-letter organizations that help define this all decided that wetlands do serve a very specific purpose.
And they're vital.
And they're vital to the cleanliness and like of the water that we drink and use every day. So I think you have a few more definitions. That
Maybe
you
just one more, right?
Well, yeah, there's a number of different milestones along the way, but I think we should just jump ahead to the most important ones, the ones that lead to this,
exciting
the most exciting, the ones that lead to this podcast and the things that we're currently studying. So in 2021, the EPA and the Army Corps proposed a new definition for WOTUS and sent it out for public comment, provide the public comment period. The proposed rule mirrors many of the aspects of the pre-2015 definition while incorporating the relatively permanent and significant nexus standards from Rapanos, the Supreme Court case that established that significant nexus test. The agencies received, according to this, approximately 113,000 public comments on the proposal.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. But yeah, let's jump ahead to 2023 and
Very
U.S.
recent.
Supreme Court, Sackett versus EPA.
Thank you, Samuel Alito.
Yes, this is where everything starts to fall apart and raise concerns. So, okay, help me with the facts of the case. So the Sacketts, a family in Idaho, were filling in a wetland for a construction project.
They were building, under the facts of the case, they were building their own house.
Yeah.
But it should be noted that they own a construction company, so that is likely not the only construction they would do in the area.
But what happens next is that we've got nosy neighbors sounds really mean, but I'm kind of on board, but also nosy neighbors. They're across this wetland and they pulled up their binoculars from their kitchen window and they're like, look at those Sacketts. I'm going to tattle on them. So then they go to EPA. Yeah. And they're like, hey, the Sacketts ruining this wetland. They're ruining the thing that I like to look out my window to. Not necessarily about ecological things, but definitely like, I don't want to see this anymore. So,
but all this culminates in that Supreme Court case. Essentially, it's about a family filling in a wetland to build a house. That's where it starts.
Yes.
And gets all the way up to the Supreme Court where we get this decision.
Right, we get this decision, and so initially it's just the neighbor trying to protect this wetland, presumably, correct? But it somehow finds its way. I say somehow.
We understand
how this works. It finds its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in their 2023 decision, rule 5-4 in favor of the Sackett family, and essentially redefine what a water of the United States is. Suddenly the significant nexus test is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like that no longer exists. And then, so the Sackett ruling in May invalidates the significant nexus standard holding, and the relatively permanent standard from the plurality opinion in Rapanos was the appropriate analysis to determine if a wetland or other water was a WOTUS. So suddenly, we're sitting here in this situation where there are major concerns that a vast majority of the seasonal streams and many of the wetlands throughout the United States, but mostly as a big concern in the western and southwestern United States, are no longer actually defined as WOTUS and therefore protected under the Clean Water Act, which again leads to a lot of problems. In preparation for this podcast, we tried to find different sources from EPA, USGS that estimated the total number or percentage of wetlands that are no longer protected under the CWA, and we saw everything from approximately 40 to 65, 70%.
Yeah.
Because the test and the definition change, it went from adjacent to adjoining.
I think that's like the really one of the major parts of the change is that this change from being adjacent to adjoining. So Samuel Alito is the one who writes the opinion for this. He basically thinks that if there is no significant above ground connection between a wetland and a navigable waterway, that wetland is not a WOTUS. He pretty much, if you think about his definition super hard, if you throw a dam in the middle of a river, you now have two rivers instead of one, because he does not consider them to be the same body of water. Everything has to have a continuous surface connection. There cannot be anything underground for it to be considered a WOTUS.
That is wild.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, I think that, Colin, you're working on a project that specifically looks at snowpack data and like moving to Colorado. I think you guys informed me that like a significant portion of the water here is through ephemeral. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Seasonal. Let's define that.
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in Colorado and spent a ton of my time out in the mountains experiencing and looking at seasonal snowpack and how it translates into runoff.
Yeah.
And yes, this project that I'm working on within the MENV program, this capstone project, is looking at snowpack in the Colorado River Basin, and approximately between 70 and 90%, it really depends on the data that you're looking at.
Yeah.
70 to 80 to 90% of the total runoff into the Colorado River originates in the form of snowpack in the higher Rocky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
This wouldn't be included then, though, in the current definition, because
Correct.
it's not like a continuous above ground stream connection.
Correct.
It's seasonal.
It has to be permanent, and exactly what you're saying. It's seasonal.
Yeah, and so the new WOTUS definition, it's fine in many regards to riparian waters, everything that we see east of essentially the central Great Plains, or what's the meridian?
The 100th.
The 100th meridian.
meridian.
Everything east of the 100th meridian, where riparian lawn, riparian water, everything's just wet. They get ample rainfall.
Yeah.
But out here, when you're starting as snowpack, it means that the runoff is seasonal. April 1st SWE is a metric often used in SWE standing for snow water equivalent. That's often the metric. So essentially from early April through into July, we start seeing this major spring to summer runoff every single year out of the Rocky Mountains. And by the time that we get into late summer, August and September, rivers are running low, the reservoirs are also running low, and the seasonal streams have dried up. But if you have 70-90% of your water coming from snowpack, that inevitably and invariably means that all the water that eventually makes its way to any obvious WOTUS, like the Colorado River, is going to come in the form of an ephemeral stream, which is not protected under this new definition.
Yes.
So, just to reiterate, we could just like start an industry where we just start polluting these these ephemeral streams, and it'd be like, oh, it's okay. It doesn't necessarily connect to the Colorado River water, and then we'll just like pollute the water for every what? How many people? 40 million people?
Yeah, 40 million people.
Downstream.
Before we get too far, I do have a game for y'all to play, so we'll get to that in a second. But I really want to like hit on what is covered under the old definition and what's covered in this post-Sackett definition. So ephemeral streams covered under the old because they end up connecting to like the Colorado River.
They're tributaries, they're creeks, they're other stuff.
All that stuff. They're covered under the old one. But now they are not permanent, and you have to be permanent for this new standard. So those are no longer covered. And then the wetlands are not covered anymore because they're not adjoining, they're just adjacent to. So those are no longer covered. What else isn't covered? I think that's the two big ones, right?
I mean, those are the primary things that changed post Sackett, at least in the Southwest. Because again, like everything east and in the Pacific Northwest, it is pretty much permanent. It's continuous.
And those ephemeral streams do pass the significant nexus test of being significantly connected to a navigable waterway when they are running. But that didn't matter under the old definition. Under the new definition, it has to be permanent all year round, which is not something we see in the West. And above ground, yes. That's the another big one. They have to be above ground. Yeah.
Right, which, again, another massive issue for the West and the Southwestern United States, because some crazy percentage of the water that gets pulled in the Central California Valley area, in Arizona, comes from aquifers and groundwater.
Not most, but a significant portion of New Mexico and Albuquerque and Santa Fe's water is also groundwater aquifers rather than above ground Rio Grande water.
Yeah, so all aquifers are no longer covered.
Wells.
Wells.
Think about how many people in the Southwest, including on reservations in Navajo Nation, for instance, that pull all of their drinking water from wells. That's all groundwater. And under this new definition, it's more difficult to legally and scientifically define and
protect. Yes.
This water.
Yeah. All right.
And I think there's like 30 tribes that live along the Colorado River.
That are all affected by this change. All right.
But let's play our game show.
Yeah, let's get into our game show. So this game show is called WOTUS or NOTUS. Basic principle is, does this count as a WOTUS? Or is it
in the post-Sackett world?
We're going to do both. Is it covered under the old definition, and has that changed? Okay. Essentially, that's what we're going to do.
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right, let's get into this first one. This is a very large and wide river with lots of greenery on both sides.
Yeah,
this river is considered probably the most important in the U.S.
The Mississippi.
It is the Mississippi.
Oh, I was like, it's real wide. It must be the Mississippi.
Yeah, it's like more than a quarter mile wide.
Yeah, I think this is
vegetation all on either sides.
I think we should pause and I should tell you guys really quick. I love trivia. Yeah, so I'm very excited, and I'm probably just going to scream out the name of the river if I know it, and I'm not sorry about it.
This might be the only one that you know. Absolutely.
Oh damn!
I'll ask you every time because the next one I know you don't know.
We'll see, but it is the Mississippi.
This is the Mississippi. That was going to be my follow-up. It's like, what's this river? This is the Mississippi. This is the navigable waterway of the U.S.
Okay.
WOTUS or NOTUS?
Oh, WOTUS. Like WOTUS until the end of time.
It has to be.
Post-Sackett to pre-Sackett. This is WOTUS.
Right, because it's one of the most economically significant rivers in the U.S. I can't imagine this not being covered by the waters of the U.S. As we talked about, most of the definitions at the beginning were specifically to protect this type of waterway.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. So this is the water of the United States. Like that's... I mean, the Cuyahoga feeds into the Mississippi, so like this is massive. So yes, good job, everybody.
Okay, let me take scores.
Yeah,
Toddy and Colin 1.
Yeah, and just because I want to nerd out about this, because everything in my mind comes back to the Southwest. The Mississippi River has an estimated annual flow of approximately 170 million acre feet.
Wow.
An acre foot essentially being an acre foot is the amount of water that it takes to cover 1 acre of land in a
foot
foot
of
of
water.
Exactly. So
What's the other option for that?
CFS.
Or gigaliters? Is that
That
the other
there's a
measurement?
whole bunch of different ones. Gigaliters, I do remember. That's like the metric way of doing
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
right, yeah, but in acre feet is such an American thing to do.
Oh,
but
well,
it's also really
well, so is CFS, cubic feet per second.
Yeah.
that's,
I
that's
like
very-
acre feet.
Acre
Yeah.
feet makes sense.
But
Sorry.
acre feet, so 1 acre foot, for reference, is approximately like 328,000 gallons of water,
Yes.
right? And so the Mississippi is 170 million acre feet per
Wow.
year. The Colorado River, depending on the year, because again,
Yeah.
snow variability,
Yep.
is somewhere between like 12 and 15 million acre feet.
Whoa.
Yes.
And in recent years, it's been as low as 8 million acre feet.
Yes.
So it's tiny compared.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is massive compared to anything we have out west.
So
Big
WOTUS.
river.
WOTUS,
WOTUS,
yes.
we
Mississippi
did it.
River is a WOTUS. So let's go to this next picture. So this is short-haired me in 2017 with my buddy Alex.
Okay.
We're at this place called 5 Mile Dam down in Texas.
It has a dam.
It does. The dam is off to the right in the picture. We're actually downstream of it, funnily enough. But, Toddy, what do you see in this picture concerning water? What do you see?
I don't see much vegetation.
I should say I cropped this. There is vegetation.
Okay, there's some vegetation. What do I see regarding water?
How much water is there?
It's not a lot of water.
It's not a lot, but it is there.
It
right?
is there.
running. Let
It's
me-
definitely like a smaller stream. And
Yeah.
I feel like the rock bed shows that it used to be bigger or can be
Getting
bigger.
ahead of yourself, Tamara.
Oh, I'm
Because
sorry.
This is a two slider.
Oh, okay. All right. Not a lot of vegetation on one side of the river. It's flowing a little bit. I think. Do you want to say anything else about it?
I mean, the fact that this is in Texas, I'm gonna get ahead and just guess that it's a WOTUS, but are you gonna show us? the second one?
I'll let y'all debate this in a second.
Okay.
Let me give you some more facts about where this is. This is 5 Mile Dam Park, south of Kyle, Texas, in between Kyle and San Marcos. This is on the Blanco River. Blanco feeds into the San Marcos River, which feeds into the Guadalupe River, which ends up emptying out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
Lots of tubing, fishing, all that kind of stuff happening.
Commerce.
So
Commerce
it's
on
economically important.
on this river, right? But this is middle of March still. I think we just had a rainstorm, so
Okay.
this is pretty clear water running right now, right?
I just want to clarify. So, I guess it really wouldn't matter. I was like, when does snowpack start to happen?
No,
But
snowpack
snowpack's not necessarily a thing in
This runs
Texas.
through this runs through Central Texas.
Right. Never mind.
I just want to remind that when we did get snow in Central Texas, the whole place shut down.
Yeah.
And it is a river. It's running through the dam's back here somewhere. But this is pretty clear water.
Yeah.
And it's right after a rainfall event. But based on this picture and what I just told y'all, WOTUS or NOTUS, purely, let's just go old definition here.
Old definition.
Yeah, you know
WOTUS.
what?
Oh,
We'll do both.
Pre-Sackett, WOTUS. Post-Sackett, I'm a little bit of a pessimist. I'm going to say NOTUS. I'm not actually a pessimist. But I feel like the inclusion of the dam scares me. I can see a lot of rock beds. So
Yes.
maybe you said it had just rained. So I'm thinking about how this water could actually just be a symptom of the rain and not necessarily flowing all the time. But I have no idea. So
Colin?
yes, post maybe.
I think it's gonna be WOTUS, both pre and post. Sackett.
Pre and post?
Yeah, the fact that it rained and the water is still running clear shows that it's not necessarily like unnatural runoff to me. So
And I should say that this park behind the dam, upstream of the dam, they have like a rope swing, and it's significantly deep to where
Okay.
you can land in it and
Okay.
so
stuff
WOTUS.
like that.
Okay, so lay it on us.
Let me go to the next slide.
Oh, it's actually.
So this
Oh man!
It's not permanent.
is yeah, Colin. Let explain to me what you're seeing.
Yeah,
and then
so
I'll give
two
you some.
photos of presumably the same river and riverbed.
Yep.
It's completely dry. It's like something out of a
It's bone dry.
post-apocalyptic movie, like the
Y'all ever heard of caliche?
Clichy.
Caliche. It's a type of rock. It's like a calcrete. There's a lot of caliche up on the sides. That's why it's like this white rock.
Yeah, this is sad. This is what you like.
It's bone dry.
Yeah, this is what you go for like, if you're a filming crew filming Mad Max. Like,
Yeah. So this is what 5 Mile Dam looked like most of my childhood.
Really?
This is actually the dam on the right, and there's a little rock wall at the other end of it. But yeah, it was bone dry. You couldn't go to it. It was really hot always that dry. I remember it must have been just before my freshman year of high school that it had water in it for the first time in like a decade.
Where does the water come from? Is it like
It's just rain. Texas had an incredible drought for most of my childhood. You can see like the bathtub rings on all of the lakes and stuff out there of where the water used to be, and like all the lakes, you would just see like the old piers just sitting on rock, just like they do at Lake Powell, Lake Mead. But yeah, I mean, this is bone dry. There's nothing here, and I did kind of give it away that it was right after rain in the first one.
no?
So with this new information,
Yeah.
pre Sackett,
Yes.
still yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, post.
It feeds San Marcos, which feeds Guadalupe, which is a major river in Texas. Post Sackett,
No, it's not permanent.
it's not permanent.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tragic.
It's all dried up. It is literally bone dry.
That's really scary because we just talked about how many people use this river daily in their lives, right? Recreation, drinking water. Go ahead.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, there's this feeds into the San Marcos River, like I said, and then San Marcos River has its own salamander that is endemic only to the San Marcos River headwaters.
See, and
So they were hit hard by this.
right, and this is a problem because, and we'll provide more context for this, I assume, in a bit, but with this current definition, with no protections under the CWA, the Clean Water Act, this means that if for whatever reason some manufacturer would come in and build a factory and get a 404 permit, well, they wouldn't even need a 404
They don't need it.
permit.
Yeah, they don't need it
just
anymore.
build this factory and presumably can and would pollute. There's no CWA protection.
I can tell you near where I grew up, there's a giant cement factory.
Oh no!
That poor salamander.
No.
But under
Sally.
the pre-Sackett definition, they have a permit, and the
It would need
salamander is
a 404
they're protected. But anything new that comes in, they're not protected anymore.
Okay,
Well, not
that's
cool.
great.
So this is a little bit of a Texas example of where I'm from, of something that was covered beforehand. It's no longer covered under the Sackett definition.
Do we have others?
I do not have any others.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time in this river growing up.
That's tragic.
It's
and
very tragic.
I'm so sad for that. Do we
Yes.
have more?
I do have more questions for y'all. So, this is a hydrograph from the Potomac River.
Okay.
What are we noticing? Just timeline wise, this is 1 year worth of data from April 3rd, 2024, April 3rd of 2025.
Okay.
What do we notice?
It never bottoms out.
Never bottoms out.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So,
There's significant highs, right? We're
Yeah.
going to almost 16
16 feet.
feet of water. That's a lot of water.
It is.
This is in Maryland, right?
No, this is near. Well, yeah. There we go. Potomac, Point of Rocks, Maryland. So near DC.
I feel like we're in one of Dr. Megan's classes. What else do you notice about this graph, Colin?
I think y'all have actually hit like the major points.
Okay.
WOTUS or NOTUS, pre-Sackett.
Pre-Sackett? Go ahead, Colin, you first.
I'm gonna guess WOTUS both pre and post because it never reaches zero. And the other context clue, it's in Maryland. It's a riparian area.
Yes.
Correct.
Does this feed into
I mean, it crosses state borders.
does this go into the Chesapeake Bay? Does this
Yeah.
the largest estuary in the United States. I'm guessing WOTUS.
It's WOTUS.
It's WOTUS both?
WOTUS on both.
Rad.
Yep. Now let's go to this next one.
We're killing it at this game.
So this is 4 Mile Canyon Creek near
Colorado.
Sunshine, Colorado. Yeah, you've already picked up one of the major differences here. What can y'all tell me about?
Whoa. This is 1 year. This is also...
This is 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, it looks like it starts in April, which is when you said the
yeah,
snowpack rain
I'll say
starts.
this is April 2nd to April 2nd 1 year worth of data.
Oh, wow.
And there's a little tiny.
Oh, I see it over
Yeah,
there.
right at the very end.
And April 2nd was like the first day of water being back in the creek.
That's the sweet day, right?
Yeah.
When most metrics when they look at SWE are looking at April 1st SWE, like what they call peak SWE, though that date might be coming into question as like an accurate
As things change.
date to measure. We might need to push that back a little bit.
Okay.
What's going on from October to April though?
Oh, it's an ephemeral stream. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist from October to April because we see it skyrocket. Like what is that, end of May?
You say it skyrockets. I want to point out that the last hydrograph was measured in height, and this one's cubic feet per second.
Right.
It doesn't even cross like 3 cubic feet per second. That's
I was about to say skyrocket's a big letter.
Yeah.
2 cubic feet per second.
From non-existence to
2.
3
Yeah.
to a decent trickle.
Yeah.
cubic feet per second.
Oh no.
Now, pre-Sackett,
WOTUS.
post-Sackett.
No, it's not permanent.
No.
Exactly.
That's wild. I can't believe that like ephemeral streams are not covered in this because by this definition, presumably we could just post up a dog food factory and start polluting the water there.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
Definitely no subtle undertone in your choice.
I didn't realize it until it was too late. I was like, she already started it.
Something more Western Slope, a mining operation.
A mining operation, yeah.
Could come in. They don't need a permit for this anymore.
Oh, the 404 permits.
Yeah, they don't
We don't need to tell anybody that we're polluting the water.
Yes, and maybe we should take this moment to define what the 404 program is.
Okay.
It's from Army Corps of Engineers, right? And essentially it's the way to get a permit to be able to be a polluter, essentially. Correct me where I'm wrong, guys. But it's basically the permit that allows you to pump your effluent into a water of the United
to pollute
States.
to a certain level.
To a certain level, yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what this is. For this Potomac, you need a 404. This
Because it's a water of the U.S.
because it's a water of the U.S. This 4 Mile Canyon Creek, don't need it.
Poor Sunshine, Colorado.
Yes. Let's go to the next one.
Oh.
So this is in Utah, western Utah. This is Priet wetland. I think that's how it's pronounced.
I would like to say that those look like cactuses.
It is pretty dry here, but
Yeah.
this is a wetland because I mean there's some puddling. I'll say it. It's not very deep, but let me give you a quick significant fact here. There is a creek, not always running, that empties into the Colorado River that runs out of this wetland. It is situated next to the Colorado River. Its water drains into
the Colorado.
Into the Colorado. But there is a significant above ground connection.
Okay.
Pre-Sackett. Yes or no?
Yes,
Absolutely.
pre-Sackett because it has that above ground. So yeah, it's WOTUS. It connects to the Colorado.
Yeah.
So
Post.
You just told me that we can basically see the Colorado River from the edges of this wetland.
Yeah, it's not far, and there is water that runs from this wetland to
the Colorado River.
And I will say,
this
post, whatever you answer for post, it could go either way.
I agree. Colin, do you want to go first?
Well, I assume that I have this feeling that you chose this because it's one of the fringe cases where like adjacent versus adjoining really matters, and in the seasonality because it is in the Southwest, like I'm thinking drought years. Does an obvious surface connection no longer exist during drought years, meaning it's precluded from CWA?
I have a quick question about that, actually.
Fire away.
So, how do we? I'm sure we can not do this if you want. We can.
No, I want to hear this.
Okay. When we're talking about these drought years, do we measure the wetlands in their drought years? Or I guess maybe my question is, how are we measuring that these wetlands exist? Because if we go out there last year, I don't think it was was it a particularly wet year?
No, last year was very average.
Okay, so last year we went out, we'd seen probably most of the wetlands, right? But like, we're still within that 30-year drought cycle that we exist in. Mm-hmm. So if we go out maybe this year or next year, are those wetlands still there? And then what does that mean for this definition? Mm-hmm. Like, if we're talking about having to have a significant adjoining water connection, I almost said significant nexus. That's not true.
We don't talk about that anymore.
We don't talk about that anymore. If it has to have like a connection, when are we measuring these and how are we measuring these? And does the drought matter in this?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what the answer is because it's an incredibly important question, but you're going to have 10 different answers.
Okay.
Right. And I assume, that's one of the problems with this new definition, right? Is in order to determine if these wetlands, rivers, etc., are permanent and properly have adjoin and have a continuous surface connection, you're going to need researchers and personnel out on the ground. There's no great way to do this via satellite or aerial survey. Mm-hmm. So
you got to have boots on the ground.
Right, you have to have boots on the ground. And I tend to doubt that the various state and federal agencies that would be determining this are getting out there season after season to determine.
They don't have the resources.
I mean, it must be so time consuming because I think we know that in order to measure if it's a wetland, it has to have soil samples and plant samples a whole bunch of, and like water samples. And again, we're currently in a drought cycle, right? So what if we go out there now?
Yep.
But when we're out of the drought, hopefully, when we're out of the drought cycle, would it still be there?
Yeah. So let me add another wrinkle to this.
Oh.
So that creek.
I don't love wrinkles.
I know, isn't it fun? the creek that empties out into the Colorado River, I would argue, it's on a semi-permanent basis. It is mostly there. It is mapped out. It is. So I am calling that a WOTUS because it is there.
Okay.
But there's not a definitive answer to WOTUS or NOTUS for the image.
So if you've got a pond off over here and then you've got this rocky outcropping in the middle, and then you've got that creek on the other side, is that pond covered?
Oh no, because
I don't think so.
I think that wetlands have underground connections, so
yes,
I'm
but
assuming no.
It's not a surface connection.
Right. And this
is impossible.
Yeah.
How are they doing this? This is impossible. How are they informing policy off of science that is not well recorded? Yeah, not well recorded, not well looked after. Mm-hmm. How are we informing policy based on that, like, WOTUS or NOTUS definition?
There's one judge on the Supreme Court from Colorado.
Gorsuch.
Oh,
from the West. I presume. I actually don't know where the other 8 are, but I believe it's pretty much all Eastern.
Most East Coast.
I think it's mostly Eastern,
We can look that up.
So you're thinking in the context.
Yeah, fact check us real quick.
Yeah. So you're thinking in the context is you're making these Supreme Court decisions in the context of riparian law and science and not Western, seasonal.
It is a really hard question to answer of does this entire wetland fall under WOTUS post Sackett? Almost definitely not all of it. But I mean, I think that creek is. I mean, it's significantly connected constantly to the Colorado River, but is a little wet spot over here. Right. I mean, we know everything that is underground in that wetland is not going to be covered anymore.
I would like it to be, is my final answer. I would like it to be covered because, again, this feeds directly into the river that everyone else is drinking out of.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
To back up, you're right. Most of them it's the 100th meridian. Is
100th meridian, yeah.
We have one Supreme Court justice
from the westerns.
From west of the 100th meridian.
That's right.
Everyone else is New York, Washington, New Jersey, Louisiana.
So, in context matters. So, and this is going to be, this photo, this one wetland example that you have from Utah is going to be characteristic of a lot of the questions that were being asked. And what is interesting and what this photo doesn't touch on is they're not going to be getting snow and having ephemeral streams in this part of Utah.
No,
This is the part of
this
Utah
is-
that doesn't see snow.
Yeah, I think it's southwestern Utah.
Yeah.
Look at the cactuses.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you have any other examples lined up? Or
I do have more questions for you, but my ultimate takeaway from this was pre-Sackett, absolutely. Post-Sackett, maybe. Okay. Wilcox Playa. Essentially, the big thing to know about Wilcox Playa is that pre-Sackett, it is covered. Post-Sackett, it is not covered. Arizona took it upon themselves to make their own definition that is more expansive than what Sackett is, and it is covered under state definitions of what waters of the states are.
I think that's really interesting.
It is.
That
The-
the states have like the opportunity, like you said, to protect the waters.
And I should note here that out of all of the Colorado River Basin states, upper and lower, only 2 don't have their own definition. And that
Wait.
is- Do you want to take a
wanna
guess?
Yeah, you first. You guess first.
Oh, the 2 that don't?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
take a
gosh.
guess. Yeah, they're gonna feel obvious once you think
I
about
feel
it.
like it's Arizona and Wyoming.
I think it's Wyoming for sure.
Wyoming is 1. Arizona is 1.
Oh, wait,
that
no,
is-
you just said this
yeah.
is, yeah.
This
okay.
is covered.
Utah?
Utah.
It's Utah.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 upper basin states, Utah and Wyoming, are the only ones that run with the Sackett definition. All
So
other
minimum,
states,
okay.
yes, they have the absolute minimum. All the other states have more expansive, and we'll hit on this a little bit later on. After the game show, we'll talk about all the different definitions for a second. But under Arizona law, this is covered.
Okay.
Let's go to this next one. This is a lake in northeastern, Arizona on Navajo Nation land. Tasaile Lake, Tsaile
That
Lake.
sounds good.
I think I pronounced it correctly. I'm terribly sorry if I did not. Permanent, year-round, always there.
Oh, wait. Okay, wait. So if it's permanent and year round, we get to ignore the big changes that we've been talking about for the Sackett decision for WOTUS.
It's above ground and it's always there.
But it has to have an above ground connection to a WOTUS.
Would this be, hold on, would this be a WOTUS normally or no? Is it navigable? Question mark. Yes, but it doesn't cross.
Let's talk about what navigable means.
Okay.
It's not just that you can get from one place to another, but you are able to navigate on it.
Oh no.
It's so.
But
so
it's also it also supplies anything that supplies commerce in the form of recreation or
Exactly.
goods
but
across state borders.
this isn't a state.
It's Navajo Nation. It's
Navajo
not
Yeah.
Nation. That's
sovereign.
the other wrinkle.
Yeah. So was this a WOTUS pre-Sackett?
Yes, I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I would presume so.
I would hope so. I want there to
I
be.
mean, this is a large body of water that people use.
Yeah.
Its surface.
Yeah.
I think it's a WOTUS.
Okay.
Pre.
Okay.
The question is it after?
Well, it's permanent.
But does it have a permanent surface connection out of the body of water, out of Navajo Nation, and into what I presume would be the rest of the Colorado River
It's
Basin?
in the Colorado River Basin itself.
Oh,
So
no.
we can significantly assume that it does end up draining into.
I'm gonna go on good faith here and say that it is a WOTUS post-Sackett.
I want it to be a WOTUS post-Sackett, so I'm going to stand directly in the positive.
I think this is another maybe.
Oh, so we don't even know because no one's
That's
asked
the
yet.
problem is
Oh,
that nobody really knows. It's not covered under Arizona law because
It's-
it's on tribal land.
Yeah.
And they can only enter in negotiation or treaty with,
With
the federal
federal government.
Yeah.
not with Arizona.
Yeah, that is significant because a lot of the tribes along the Colorado River are asking for an adjudication and like a quantification of their water rights, and that has to go through Senate and the House as well, and then be like signed into law, which kind of
It takes a long time. It takes a long time.
kind of sucks. Last year there were 12 different water rights up, and they died on committee
Yeah,
floor.
so we don't know.
Yeah,
Essentially,
and we don't know, and that's really dangerous, right?
Yes.
Because if no one's tracking if this water
What's the stat on clean water on tribal lands?
I don't know all tribal lands. I'm sure that it varies. I have looked into the Navajo though, and 30% of the water, or 30% of the people, 33% of the people living within tribal lands of the Navajo Nation don't have access to clean water.
Yeah.
And they have to drive and pump water out of wells, which is not covered underneath the Clean Water Act anymore.
And
Yes.
we have the history of the Manhattan Project in that area with uranium mining. And
yeah.
No.
So-
I didn't even think about that
So-
being a connection. What if does the EPA still have? Oh no, does the EPA still have to go in and clean up that water if it's not covered underneath the Clean Water Act?
So that's really hard to figure out because I mean CERCLA is its own beast of yes, no, maybe. That's essentially the point of me putting in this lake is one, not covered by Arizona law.
Yeah.
Two, we don't know if it's covered or not.
By the Clean Water Act.
Yes.
Okay.
And that has significant implications for what you just said, 33% of people
Yeah.
not having clean water.
Yeah. And that's like
That number could go up because now this isn't protected.
yeah, that's significant.
And your wells aren't protected anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't know. It could make the situation of not having clean water worse.
Wow, this game isn't very fun.
No. It started real fun where we're just like,
did.
Mississippi, yes. Now it's not so fun.
I stopped marking him down. I'm getting upset. Go ahead.
Okay, this looks like Colorado.
It is Colorado. This is Western Slope. That's a irrigation ditch. Not always full.
Right.
Not always.
Right. I
with
doubt
water
this
in
has any water in it once we start getting into August and September kind of time frame.
Yeah.
Well-
exactly. Well, so let me ask. Pre-Sackett, is this a WOTUS? I think there's a definite definition here.
Well, yeah, it's an
Yeah.
irrigation ditch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has a connection to. It has a very obvious seasonal connection to a larger body of water. Yeah, so yes.
Whether it be a creek or a river, wherever they're diverting.
Yeah.
Post-Sackett.
No, seasonal.
Because
It's
it's
seasonal.
seasonal.
There's no way it can.
And it's a diversion, right? So that's like inherently not permanent. Oh no, we can just
Here's the good part. A lot of western states, particularly Nevada, cover irrigation ditches.
Oh, that makes me feel a little better.
Both natural and artificial waterways, water courses as they call them, are covered.
That makes sense. Don't we know?
Good job, Colorado.
Yeah, don't we know that like 70% of the Colorado River water is used for agriculture, according to the...
Well, 70% 70 to 90 comes from snowpack, right?
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
and then it's like 70%.
70% of the... Go ahead.
Yeah, up to 70% of the water that we extract and use from the Colorado River goes to the agricultural sector.
Yeah, that comes from the Bureau of Reclamation, and I think that...
And is a statistic frequently cited by the Nature Conservancy and other major nonprofit groups.
So let me make this point too. The Colorado definition does not specifically say artificial water courses. It just says it covers ephemeral streams. It has in here, let me read word for word.
This is the Colorado state definition?
Yes, this is the second half. I won't read all of it. This definition includes all water courses, even if they are usually dry, which I think would cover this irrigation ditch because it could be usually dry. Okay. The only problem is that they do not specifically say irrigation ditches or artificial water bodies.
Right.
Nevada does.
Yeah.
They purposely put that in there.
Yeah.
So under Colorado statute,
Yeah.
I think this is another maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
Pre-Sackett, I think it's covered.
Yeah.
Post-Sackett, definitely not.
Well, and under Colorado statute, that leaves a lot of agency and autonomy up to decision makers in Colorado, and given Colorado's track record in the last several years in legislative sessions, I imagine whoever would make the call on this would say
yes. I think water in Colorado is so heavily protected that if this is pure speculation, if this did go up to the Colorado Supreme Court, they'd say yes.
Well, yeah, Colorado has its own water court.
Exactly.
Because there's
I
so
think
much volume that moves through the courts concerning water rights.
I think it would eventually get covered.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as of right now, it's still a maybe.
Okay.
But let's move on to my final question. So, This is the Lower Santa Cruz in Arizona. What's this that y'all see right up here in this picture? What does it look like? I know it's a little bit grainy, but just tell me what you think it is.
It looks like structural sediment. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, this man-made structure up here, this yellow and this
Oh, it looks like a pipe or a dam.
some kind of effluent,
Yeah.
like some kind of
What a
point source.
fun word.
but
Yes.
they're putting water drainage into this creek bed.
Yep. And how much water is behind that?
What do you mean?
But where this water is coming out, does it look like there's water in this creek beyond
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
No, that's dry back here.
That is dry. Okay.
That's
so it's
way
pure-
back here. It's dry.
Okay.
Okay, so it's purely coming from whatever
Oh, okay. This runoff is.
Yeah, this runoff is the only thing that feeds this dry creek bed,
Okay.
except for rain events.
Sure.
Then there's water in this. Let me tell you, under Arizona, this is a WOTUS. It's still considered a WOTUS because it's a dry creek bed. But this, let me give you some fun facts about this. This is a wastewater plant.
So this is treated water that's getting dumped.
This is treated water getting dumped. There's some case studies stuff about how this has actually brought back a lot of the riparian habitat.
You can see the trees on the sign.
Exactly. Yeah, this is usually it was ephemeral beforehand. Now it has a pretty consistent flow. But since it was covered under Arizona law, they had to meet certain requirements for this wastewater to come out.
Okay.
So, pre-Sackett, it's a yes. I think so, because this ends up in the Colorado still. The only thing that feeds this consistently is this wastewater, though, that has to have a 404. Post-Sackett
It doesn't have to.
doesn't need it. Luckily, under Arizona law, it still does.
But under federal law, it doesn't.
It does not.
So there could be this Utah and Wyoming.
Yes, if this was happening in Utah and Wyoming, they could be dumping. It didn't matter what quality they were pumping out here, because
but
they don't
Arizona's
have to.
requiring them.
Arizona
to-
does.
Okay.
That's the good part.
Right. So now I'm starting to see like this trend that I assume you're getting at with
Yes.
with these later examples.
That
That we should be maybe focusing, like the federal definition isn't necessarily specific enough to
Yes.
protect the water that we use in the Colorado River Basin.
Yep.
But maybe the state definitions are.
The state definitions do a lot. They go a lot. That's one of the good things about water is that a lot of it ends up being left to the states. Didn't think I'd be a states' rights guy here. But the main thing I want to point out with this example is that if this does not fall under a state one, like if it's in Utah or Wyoming, doesn't matter what this wastewater plant is pumping out. They are not going to be regulated by CWA 404 program stuff.
And then suddenly you have this collective action problem where guess what? There's 7 states that are in the Colorado River Basin.
Yep.
And you need all actors to be complying at somewhat similar standards in order to actually have a healthy river basin.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna take that as like a quick jumping off point to give us some Bureau of Rec information about the Colorado River Basin, because I think that's where we're going. The Colorado River Basin is about 250,000 square miles, and the river itself is about 1,400 miles long. The river is a water source for irrigation, sanitation, drinking water, recreation, ecological, cultural, whatever, everything you need water for Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, about 30 tribes, and Mexico.
Yep.
So this is covering a lot of places. I think we already talked about it. 70% of the Colorado River water is used specifically for agriculture. And then you said 70 to 90% of that comes from snowmelt, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Currently, that means about 40 million Americans. This is not including the water that's owed to Mexico and probably the tribes, as the tribes should have rights to about 20% of the river, according to the Audubon Society, but currently do not have water rights for that much water. So 40 million Americans, asterisk, there should be more people added to this, 40 million Americans use the Colorado River as drinking water.
Yep.
I think you also mentioned that like we have a significant portion of our winter vegetables are grown off of Colorado River water.
Yeah, so the Central California Valley, the Imperial Valley, it's a year-round growing season, which means that valley, and therefore Colorado River water in particular, grows up to 90% of the U.S.'s winter vegetable crop. And then other estimates that I've seen from the likes of the Nature Conservancy and some other groups say that somewhere around 40% of the U.S.'s total agricultural output is grown by the Colorado River.
Wow.
Remember, this is a river that is somewhere between 8 and 15 million acre feet annually.
Yeah. So when we're talking about how important it is that the Colorado River Basin states have the same definition, it's to protect all of these economic, ecological, cultural processes, right? So as we're moving from the federal definition into a state definition, maybe they should all have like one solid definition so that we can protect all of these waters. And we're not hoping that some states have stricter definitions than other states, because we're all drinking that water.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads me really well into this talking about all the definitions that the states have. So 7 states, 2 of them, Utah and Wyoming, use the Sackett definition. The other 5 have their own definitions of varying degree.
Do you have like...
I have these definitions.
Do you have like one or two that are like...
There's one that I think takes the cake as the most protective and the absolute best. Let me just go over some of them. Let me read the whole... Since we're in Colorado, I'll start with Colorado. So the Colorado definition says, waters of the state of Colorado means any and all surface and subsurface waters that are contained in or flow in or through the state of Colorado. The definition includes all watercourses, even if they are usually dry. So what I really love about this one is that it covers the ephemeral streams, and it covers subsurface, any wetlands, any aquifers, anything like that.
So wells and aquifers and groundwater. Subsurface doesn't sound groundwater.
It's better than the Sackett that it doesn't say it needs to be a continuous surface. Adjoining, something like that. I think that one is pretty good. Let's look at New Mexico. New Mexico. All natural waters flowing in streams and watercourses, whether such be perennial or torrential, within the limits of the state of New Mexico, belong to the public and are subject to appropriation for beneficial use. That's a whole another beast.
Yeah.
A watercourse is hereby defined by any river, creek, arroyo, canyon, draw, or wash, or any other channel having definite banks and bed with visible evidence of occasional flow of water.
Yeah, I was going to say, just by definition, the fact that arroyo's in there means that ephemeral streams are covered.
Yeah, ephemeral's covered, but in my understanding of this, they don't really cover wetlands or aquifers, especially saying that it needs a channel and a bed.
Yeah.
That's not a wetland.
Right, or an aquifer. I don't know how many wetlands are naturally occurring in New Mexico.
I think it is interesting that they did not cover that.
Yeah.
Let's look at Arizona. All waters within jurisdiction of this state, including all perennial or intermittent streams, lakes, ponds, impounding reservoirs, marshes, watercourses, waterways, wells, aquifers, irrigation systems, drainage systems, and other bodies or accumulations of surface, underground, natural, artificial, public, or private water situated wholly or partly bordering on the state.
Wow.
That's a pretty expansive one. I didn't find a whole lot wrong with it. I mean, they even get into the artificial, talking about wells and irrigation ditches. They get all accumulations, surface or underground. It is a pretty damn good definition. It's pretty all-encompassing.
I was going to ask you, do you think that includes, like, water that is dammed? But
they have impounding reservoirs.
Reservoirs
is included in that, which I think is great. Here's the California one. It's a bit shorter. Any surface water or groundwater, including saline waters, within the boundaries of the state. Does not mention any intermittent streams or ephemeral streams, but I find it interesting that it includes saline waters.
Yeah.
And then it also has groundwater in it. so it's a short definition. It's not doesn't cover everything, but it does cover things that others haven't, considering those saline waters. And then I will finish us off with my favorite definition, which is actually the Nevada definition. Let me get this pulled up. So they have an interesting way of doing this. This is from Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. They just have essentially a chart. They have, so let me read this off. It says, waters of the state are all waters situated wholly or partly within or bordering upon the state of Nevada. This includes, but is not limited to, and then there's a chart underneath it, streams, washes, wells, lakes, watercourses, impounding reservoir, ponds, waterways, irrigation systems, marshes, springs, drainage systems, all bodies of accumulation of water, surface and groundwater, natural or artificial. I don't think that definition gives any room for anything not to be. If it is water, it is protected, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to point out the two states that have the most comprehensive definitions, which are Arizona and Nevada.
Which have the least amount of Colorado River water.
Right, yeah.
They have the most to protect, which is, I think, why they have such, I don't want to say crazy, but like so comprehensive. Like that their definitions cover so much because they have so little. They have to protect absolutely everything. Yeah, I love this Nevada definition. I also love the way it's actually formatted on the website, because it's very easy to read and understand for the general public. But they cover absolutely everything. I mean, they even cover springs.
Yeah, the only thing I'm scared of is it just, at the end, it just gives a blanket thing. I was going to say the only thing I'm scared of is like listing specific definitions of like what each waterway has to be in order to be protected. But at the end, it just says any water within the state.
Yeah, it just says all bodies of accumulation of water, surface and underground. So that covers any river that's at the top, any aquifer that's underneath.
Yeah. So
and natural or artificial.
So for this podcast and this presentation and this project, we were told to come up with like a policy recommendation for like what we want to see. What do we want to see? Do we want to see the Colorado Basin states take on this all-encompassing definition of waters of the United States so that we can better protect the drinking water of 30 tribes and 40 million people?
Us being in the program we are, I think it's pretty obvious where we're going to end up going of the most comprehensive definition.
Yeah. What did you want to say?
Yeah. What do you think, Colin?
Oh, I think this is perhaps in the post-Sackett world the best option for the Colorado River in particular, given that it is the most important river in the Southwest, where we do have all these questionable waterways for being included, defined as WOTUS, or at least protected by state definitions.
Yeah.
And I think what would be super important to point out is that this wouldn't be the first time that we have a sub-federal interstate standardizing agreement that elevates regulation, or at least policy, law and policy, above the state but still below the federal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously what I'm talking about is the Colorado River Compact from 1922.
Yeah.
And there's a whole list, what do they call it, law of the river?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of just things that have been negotiated, talked about, agreed upon,
Yeah.
solely for the Colorado River. So that there's precedent for the Colorado River Basin, all of those states coming together and deciding on something.
For themselves.
Of
like what rules we should all follow as like the basin states.
And Colin, there's something coming up in 2026, right?
Yeah, so the Colorado River Basin states under the River Compact are having to renegotiate their drought contingency plan.
Yes.
Yep, it's expiring here in 2026, which means we need to renegotiate, and this is particularly contentious because, as Tati mentioned earlier, we're currently experiencing this like 30-year drought cycle.
Yep.
And essentially this is how the basin states are determining how to actually allocate water and water rights throughout the basin, given the shortages that we've seen. In 2023, both Lakes Powell and Meade hit all-time lows, which the lows were, it was particularly scary because I believe it was at the Glen Canyon Dam, so Lake Powell. they were 30 feet away from not being able to generate
Deadpool.
hydroelectric power.
30 feet?
Yeah, 30 feet.
Oh
So-
my gosh. I think whenever I see that, I just see like the numbers and I've never done the math.
Right.
My
So-
goodness.
So we can do the math, but
nothing.
yeah, for people who listen and are privy to this, and perhaps you've seen aerial photos of both Lakes Powell and Mead with the classic white bathtub ring where you can see their historic highs and everything in between. Now, the 22-23 snow season, well, first of all, it was a great ski season. Second of all, it did help to recharge. I'm sorry, no, that would have been 23 and 24 seasons. Yeah. Did help to recharge both of the lakes, at least a little bit. So it'll relieve some of the pressure, but yeah, it does. It not only if it gets low enough, are the dams not able to generate hydroelectric power, but if they reach dead pool, then no water flows.
Right.
Yes.
And suddenly 40 million people are in crisis. And on top of that, you start to have questions about the structural integrity of the dams.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just the way that that dams of that size operate, if you start cresting water over the top, structural integrity issues. If you start getting to dead pool, again, more structural integrity issues. So
essentially, all of the states are having to come together right now to talk about
What could happen?
What could happen, what they're going to do, right? These are our drought contingency plans. And I think for our policy recommendation, this is a perfect vehicle to get our definition like codified for all 7 of the states.
right, make it conditional on the passage of the plan
Yes.
to have this new definition to ensure the health of the basin.
Yeah,
And I think
I love that.
going forward, we should really take example from Arizona and Nevada when doing this definition, because they are the ones with the least amount of water, and we are going less and less water.
Yeah.
So we need to learn how to protect our water based off of the people who already don't have much water.
Right. I mean, Nevada, their allocation of the Colorado River Compact and the Boulder Canyon Project Act from 1928, they only receive 300,000 acre feet annually.
Yeah,
not
and
a
you
lot of
said
water.
the total is between 12 and 15, which actually I think the Colorado River Compact allocates 17.5 million acre feet.
Yeah. But that's based
total-
on bad science.
Yes, yeah, we should also really note that this river is over-allocated, over-promised, underwatered.
Yeah.
So that we're getting less and less water every single year, and we need to protect what little water we have. And as you get to less and less water, the more polluted it can become. The easier it is to really throw off the water quality.
Right, because
Right.
concentrations go up.
Exactly. So we have to have this definition that really protects our water quality. And I think that's where our policy recommendation comes in, where I think we should use this Nevada definition and maybe expand on it. I don't think there's much room to expand on it. But simply be like, all right, part, section, whatever, in this drought contingency plan, boom, Nevada definition.
Yeah.
And essentially they have to agree on it. And there's negotiations in there, but put this in. That is our policy recommendation, is to get this definition into the drought contingency plan to protect water.
Yeah. I think I think it's a reasonable ask to make sure that like the water of this basin is protected from us, right? Like
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the best way that we're going to get around the Sackett definition
Yes.
and ensure that the Colorado River Basin remains intact, because it was already questionable prior to Sackett what was going to happen in the basin. And this drought contingency plan was already going to enter into negotiation here in 2026. I do see challenges inserting a basin definition, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, the history of the river basin and the compact is just fraught with challenges and interstate infighting.
Yeah.
There's a great book called Science Be Damned by Eric Kuhn and John Fleck that demonstrates how policy and politicians ignored good science when writing the compact, basing it decisions and flow rates on the Fall Davis report rather than LaRue's hydrology estimates, which proved to be prescient and more accurate. And if you dive into the political history between the states,
Yeah.
one thing that becomes apparent is how much fighting there was, particularly with Arizona and the other states.
They had their own navy.
Yeah,
Arizona had a navy.
Yeah.
Because of California.
Because of California.
They didn't want California to take their water. Not
Yeah,
that Arizona's on the right side of history in this one, but like I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, they were protecting what they could.
And then you get the upper basin states saying, okay, we're going to move forward with this regardless. And Arizona,
Yeah.
several Supreme Court decisions later. Point being, the fighting over the actual allocation itself hindered the compact negotiations, and political positioning in line probably played a huge role in actually passing the compact initially over 100 years ago. But it's just in the very nature of these southwestern states who are juggling and fighting for the securing of their water rights.
Yeah.
That in I can see certain states looking at this definition and being concerned that they will be precluded from water rights that they currently possess.
Yeah. And I think we should highlight at the CRUA meeting last year in Vegas, CRUA, Colorado River Water Users Association, the upper division states
felt like they didn't need to participate in the drought contingency plan creation, as if you ask the upper basin states, they always meet their obligations to send 7.5 million acre feet of water downriver, so they don't think it's their problem that there is global climate change
which is
decreasing the amount of water on the river. Go ahead.
They essentially, at that meeting, people were already not wanting to play ball.
Correct.
But they kind of have to.
Yeah, especially since, I mean, the Bureau of Rec thinks that the basin states will receive about 5 to 7 degrees of warming in the next, 30 years.
Right, which leads to even more questions and concerns about evaporation out of any of the reservoirs, or as the water actually flows downriver, it makes it drier. And it decreases soil moisture, which leads to more snow and or dust on snow and rain on snow events in the upper Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, which leads to earlier runoff, hence why that April 1st SWE measurement might not be effective going, or might not be the adequate date going into the future, but that also means drier late seasons and growing seasons. So
it's a lot. I mean, and I think, as we've noted, these negotiations are really, really tough and very contentious. But there is precedent that they work out in the end. Work out however you see that.
Right.
They do
the
come
11th hour.
Yes, they do come to a decision, even if they're arguing the entire time. So, and I want to note that one of the plans that has been presented is a conservation plan from a bunch of nonprofits and people like that. So there is already precedent in these negotiations for a plan
Based in science.
Based on science and based on conservation protecting the water. So this definition might be really strict and some people may not like it, but in the end this is a negotiation still, and maybe it gets whittled down, but we need to start from like the most strict possible.
Right, and if you introduce the Nevada definition, which is the strictest definition that currently exists, and you end up with something more similarly related to the Colorado definition.
Or Arizona or California.
Right, surprise, you still have a definition that protects more of
Exactly.
Waters, so.
Than the current WOTUS.
The
federal
current,
WOTUS.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's a negotiation, but there is room for this to be more protective than what we have right now. And then this leads me. You were just talking about your SWE data and stuff like that. One of the hard parts of this is that we don't really have a ton of data around what's not protected under post-Sackett versus pre-Sackett. It's really hard to understand. We mentioned a little bit earlier that some of these state departments don't have the resources to go out and check these places with like the wetlands of what's there, when's the drought, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of data limitations behind what's actually going to be protected under this. There are people working on it, They don't have a ton of resources.
Well, that's another limitation, right? There's
Exactly.
not a lot of funding
Right.
for
Yeah.
this currently, right? No one's, besides maybe, I'm sure there are more people than the three of us sitting around my kitchen table
Absolutely.
worried about this, but I don't know how much current funding there is to look into how many wetlands are currently being affecting the Colorado River Basin.
I could see Wyoming and Utah sitting at this negotiation being like, give me hard numbers on what this is actually going to
we
protect.
don't know.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
And we need to have that data.
The USGS doesn't have the hard data
Yes.
either.
And thinking about more challenges as we've seen more and more federal agencies, USGS,
Yeah.
the EPA,
Yeah.
and Bureau of Rec start to lose personnel. That's going to become more challenging, which
Yep.
is perhaps an opportunity for the states to introduce this
Yeah.
this definition and take the protection under their wing, but simultaneously that means that the individual states are going to have to produce the human power to actually conduct surveys and make these determinations, which for many states that are hoping to increase industry, I believe there's supposed to be a chips manufacturing plant opening somewhere in Arizona.
Yeah.
Suddenly, if there is going to be additional industry, then this definition, in the eyes of business, could present a barrier. Which, if you're Arizona and you want a chips factory or whatever else in your state, could be cause for resistance.
Yeah.
Similarly, I'm worried that tribes will be
left out of this definition.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something else that we need to be careful of going forward as the Colorado River Basin. They are technically part of the Colorado River Compact, but that was a late addition to the Colorado River Compact.
Article 7, nothing, quote, nothing in this compact shall be construed as affecting the obligations of the United States of America to Indian tribes.
Yeah.
Great, here's your paper rights. We've never actually realized that.
Exactly. And like going forward, we're trying to protect all of this water, but we also need to make sure that like the water that goes to these tribes and to these communities is clean and protected and part of these definitions. And we were talking about statewide definitions. The tribes themselves are located geographically within the states, but they are their own sovereign nations. So maybe bringing them to the table and asking if they would like to be part of this program would be something that we should be.
In pure
locking in on.
speculation, I'd imagine they'd want a seat at this table.
Everyone wants clean water.
You said 33% on Navajo Nation.
That is their best estimate.
That's the best estimate.
It could be more.
There's another example of a data limitation here.
Yeah.
They deserve to have a say in this. They are affected by it.
Yeah.
They need to know.
Yeah. I like it.
But this is what our policy, essentially, at the end of it, our policy recommendation is that the Nevada definition, maybe a little bit more refined, should be in these drought contingency plans to protect what little water we have in the Colorado River Basin. And it should be put into these drought contingency plans.
Yeah.
Let them negotiate about what is and isn't in there. But we need something more than what we have now.
Yeah.
And something more standardized across all the states.
Yeah.
But that is our policy recommendation.
Yeah.
Toddy, do you have any water?
I do. It's from the tap though, so I'm not really sure if it's covered under WOTUS.
Is it clean?
It should be. I've been drinking it.
Well, if it comes from the Colorado River, I assume it's a WOTUS, but maybe it's not. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with more later.